I made a Valorant aim training routine that is by far the best Valorant aim routine out there right now. I'm an aim coach. I've worked with a couple professional Valorant players including Zexro and streamers like Noted. This routine should also work very well for CSGO and any other tactical FPS game. Over the past 4 or 5 months, I've designed Valorant specific benchmarks and issue specific routines based on your weaknesses in those benchmarks. While there is some scenario overlap with the RA Valorant specific benchmarks due to sheer coincidence and the fact that I made multi-peak ascent pretty popular prior to this video, their practical applications are pretty different and a lot of the scenarios are also different. That being said, the RA Valorant benches are probably AimLab's best Valorant routine if you still refuse to buy Kovaaks, and in my opinion, scenarios for the most part cover almost all of the useful skills needed in Valorant. What's special about my own benchmarks are that they are meant to simply identify your weaknesses from a long list of potential weaknesses, which I found other benchmarks don't. Other benchmarks are all either too vague or focusing on skills that aren't needed for TAC FPS games and missing a lot of the skills that are needed. To make these scenarios, I worked with my friend StarkLN, who finished 5th in the last Kovaaks League competition and handled most of the level design. If you want to check out either of us as aim coaches on Fiverr, feel free to check out our links in the description. The first category is flicking to help you master the ability to flick to a target. The focus will be on still targets and those with very slow movement patterns. When playing against a good player with good movement, the action of flicking to a still target in aim training might seem like wasted training, but this could not be further from the truth. The specific skills that each of these scenarios train are very important for the part where you actually have to get your crosshair close to this player, and oftentimes you will even kill that player before that or movement pattern manages to throw you off. In the event that you do need to adapt to a movement pattern and hit someone who's counter strafing, it is still very important that you get to that person before they kill you, therefore a fast flick is needed. This category comes with 4 subcategories, the first of which I call speed. These scenarios are designed to emulate an in-game flick as effectively as possible. In-game, someone peeks you and you have a limited amount of time to react before they kill you. These scenarios have a target appear just like you were peeked, and then the target disappears, limiting your time to kill it, just like an enemy disappearing by hiding behind cover or by killing you in-game. Essentially, these scenarios rate your ability to react and flick quickly. The key to scoring these scenarios is that the sooner you hit the target, the more points you will receive. This forces you to continue to try and aim faster instead of aiming for perfect accuracy like most top aimers do on most reaction-based scenarios. Due to the way scenarios work, it's almost impossible to try to benchmark your reaction time separately from your ability to flick quickly, and I don't think it's super important to do so, as visual reaction time is a pretty small factor in these scenarios and it's pretty slow to train. So if you can't react quickly, train it, but you'll also need faster flicks to compensate and beat those who have a better reaction time than you. For that reason, the playlists to train speed include both reaction-based flicking scenarios and target switching. On the target switching, play like the first HNA routine, flick super fast, and allow for some shakes in your aim. On the reaction-based flicking, focus on flicking fast enough to actually hit the target, even if you rarely do. I decided to call the next category precision. This category is designed to help you focus on your ability to precisely hit very small targets. It is very useful because 1, it challenges you further than in game, and 2, you need to be able to hit the center of people's heads when you're using guns like the Sheriff and the Vandal with some first shot inaccuracy at long range, so that you have the highest chance of getting the headshot. For that reason, this category is meant to benchmark your raw ability to hit targets very precisely. When training this category, flick speed should be a non-issue. Your struggle should come in actually making the very precise motion to get perfectly onto the target. If you don't feel like you're training this when you're training these scenarios, then raise your sense. If you go so high that you start pixel skipping over targets, then lower that sense and raise your DPI. The third flicking subcategory is micro adjusting, and it will feel very similar to precision but at a much smaller angle. This pretty much just mimics when someone peeks the angle you're holding and you have to make a motion onto their head. Obviously, it doesn't copy the reaction component, but it does copy the motion you'll make, and the reaction component is trained in speed. For this category, you'll have precise clicking scenarios similar to that of the precision category, but overall closer together, and target switching scenarios that are also closer together than the speed category. I'd recommend shuffling these scenarios on random order and trying to play fast enough that you make a decent number of errors on a sense slightly higher than that you use in your main game. The final subcategory is smoothness. At the face value, smooth flicking is just a tracking scenario I put into a flicking subcategory. It's a far angle smoothness variant, but it's designed to allow you to draw a straight line, kinda like the most efficient path between between two targets. With this flick, obviously your pacing would be suboptimal, but I found that it's very nice to just practice a straight line and feel it, so that if this is a weakness, you can train it, you can improve it, and you can become more efficient in your flicks. It's especially common in newer players. The best way to relate this to an in-game occurrence would be if you find you're shaking around the person and just really struggling to control your mouse onto their head smoothly. While aiming fast, making errors, and learning from those errors would solve this issue, I found that using a smoothness routine can be sometimes a lot more efficient. The training for this category will primarily be static clicking scenarios, and in them I want you to very much focus on drawing a smooth straight line between each target, very calm and very in control while staying very precise. A big part of what separates my routine from other routines is my use of dynamic clicking scenarios. Other routines and benchmarks have these scenarios, but they don't break down dynamic clicking into subcategories that helps you find out exactly why you're bad at it, so you'll never know exactly why you can't hit the counter-strafing enemy. This allows you to focus more exclusively on exactly what you're bad at and improve faster. The first two subcategories of dynamic clicking I created are called speed and accuracy. These two categories benchmark a very similar skill, your ability to hit a randomly moving target. The difference is that these speed scenarios don't judge you for missing shots, while accuracy scored scenarios do. The speed scenarios are arguably slightly harder because of this. If you score well on speed but not accuracy, chances are you need to focus on your ability to actually be aware you're on target and break the bad habit of spam clicking and spray and pray. If you score better on accuracy than on speed, then you need to learn to push your comfort zone and get better at pushing pace as you would in game. If you score similarly on both, then treat them as one category of randomized dynamic clicking. Because ValFS 180 click requires movement for part of its scoring, if you find yourself scoring significantly worse on this scenario, I'd recommend working on your bimanual control and your shooting with movement. Bimanual control is just your ability to use both your hands at once. Even though ValFS has movement that is almost perfectly one-to-one with Valorant, I would still recommend working on the skill in the range, just strafing and shooting so that you can work on your recoil, your gunplay, and your rhythm. I decided to call the next subcategory predictable dynamic clicking, and it's exactly what it sounds like. This will feel like training what would happen if someone were to strafe in one direction forever. While this would never happen in game, the purpose is to train the control needed to hit a moving target. In game, people switch directions when they strafe, and if you can't react to their movements, then you need to train that. But if you can't hit a moving target at all, then this reaction isn't going to get you anywhere. If you're worse at this subcategory than the speed and accuracy subcategories, then that means your ability to hit predictable targets is lacking and you need to train more. One of these scenarios is a floating heads variant, and the other is a bounce 360 variant. The floating heads variant helps your ability to hit horizontal predictable targets, and your bounce 360 score tests your ability to hit a vertical moving target like someone crouching. The two combined give you the control needed to move your mouse from where it is now to the subscribe button and click it. If you have drastically different scores in each scenario, try isolating your weaknesses, whether it's vertical or horizontal, with one of those respective playlists. If not, play the combined playlist. The last dynamic clicking category I decided to call acquisition, and it's a weird category because it is actually target switching. The point of this scenario is to find a flaw you have in your dynamic clicking rather than to be an actual dynamic clicking scenario. When you flick to a static target, you need to use stopping power to come to a complete stop on the target, but when you flick to a moving target, you need to slow down without stopping and then hit it. This category is meant to benchmark and train that ability. It's a focus on evasive target switching scenarios, as these scenarios require you to not stop when you hit the target but track it instead. That means that every flick will require this slowing down motion, but because it's evasive target switching, it will also require a bunch of other skills. So if you find the scores drastically different from your other scores and you feel like you're very good at this slowing down motion, then there's a good chance that you're right. It's very possible you're struggling with one of the other many skills in evasive target switching, like being able to flick fast or effectively track the target. The last major category is tracking. Tracking itself is almost completely untranslatable for Valorant. That being said, there are certain skills that tracking scenarios will train that provide a lot of benefits for Valorant. Don't use these scenarios as a reflection of your skill, but instead treat them as a reflection of what difficulty scenarios you should train to get their respective benefits. The first subcategory is precise tracking, which is designed to focus on your ability to make small, precise adjustments. Because it is very complicated and very in-depth, other skills will be benchmarked and inevitably improved. However, the focus is on these small, precise motions. I would never allow these scenarios to dominate my training even if they were my worst scores, but I would use them. If you find you have a weakness in one of the precise categories like precision or micros, then this would be a very good indicator that you need to train on a precise playlist, and simply the benchmarks in this category would just help you find the right tracking scenarios to use. In the reactive tracking scenarios, a target moves in a way that requires you to react to it. A good indicator that this type of scenario would be good for you would be to lower the scores in accuracy and speed dynamic, but it will also help a lot with poor reaction time, limiting your speed flicking scores. Again, just treat this benchmark score as an indicator of which routine you need, not that you need a routine. Use the other categories to indicate that you might need to train this. For the actual training, I've provided an easy, medium, and difficult playlist for each type. My benchmarks are arranged into 9 tiers colored like the Valorant ranks, but named tier 1, tier 2, etc. to remind you that Valorant is attack FPS and aim alone can't take you very far. I would recommend the easy playlist to the lowest 3 ranks, the medium to the middle one, and the hard one to the upper 3. That being said, if you're in tier 1, the lowest tier in a category, and you try the hardest routine and think it helps a ton, then feel free to use that. I don't like telling anyone that my score targets are so perfect that they will always tell everyone exactly what they need, because that isn't how generalized benchmarks with paired routines work. I designed these score targets so that the top rank should be achievable for somewhere between 0 and 5 people in the world right now, as a reminder that we can all improve and that people are nowhere near their skill ceiling. Tier 4 and 5 are designed on my own personal skill level, and I'm assuming most pros in Valorant would fall between probably tier 5 and tier 8. Obviously, it's also very hard to equate 2 scores when testing 2 different skills, so if one category speaks to your weaknesses much more than the other category that your lowest score is in, feel free to treat the category that you might be slightly better at but feel you're worse at as your worst category. I'll be updating these scores as I get more data, and maybe you were right and the scores will reflect that. Maybe you're right and they won't. I don't know. It's very hard to make these generalized routines. When training, I'd recommend focusing on your weaknesses, but also putting a special emphasis on flicking speed and randomized dynamic, even if you find them easy, as these are some of the most important categories for Valorant. Thanks for watching. If you want something more personalized, check out my Fiverr in the description, subscribe if you want more aim training tips on YouTube, and I'll see you next time.